hit the like button, share the video, leave a comment, subscribe. First and foremost, you already know how I carry it. I want to say thank you to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. If it wasn't for him, this would not be possible. Once again, hit the like button, share the video, leave a comment, subscribe. I have a lot to talk about today. Boxing Bochinche. First off, I want to apologize to my followers out there. I know I haven't been that active lately. I've been very busy. I've been caught up with a lot of personal things in life right now. And because of that, I wasn't, able to record as many videos that I would have liked to. And usually, when there's not much to talk about, because I'm not really into Bochinche and all that, I don't make videos. But there's been a lot of boxing Bochinche para que tú lo sepa. So, I figured maybe I just go live on and touch on all of these topics. Shout out to, yeah, man, I need reading glasses. I'm old head, but salute, stopping Doma. Salute to you, for sure. Thank you for tuning in. Do me a favor, please. When you step inside the crib, take your shoes off and you walk on the rug, hit the like button, man. Hit the like button. But like I said, we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on in boxing right now. Thank you, I appreciate that. The like button, my nigga, my brother. Like I said, Turkey Al-Sheikh, since he's been in boxing, shout out to Turkey Al-Sheikh, he's been doing what he could to make boxing great again. But he's been announcing fights, not just Turkey Al-Sheikh, Michael Carpenter. A lot of people are talking about fights that are in discussion, fights that are being finalized. And we should already learn from the past. Remember when Turkey Al-Sheikh announced that Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder was in discussions? Remember that? What happened? He put a card with both fighters on the same card, and Deontay Wilder lost. He did it again, and Deontay Wilder lost again. That fight never materialized. And I say that to say this. There was an announcement not that long ago that Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford would be fighting sometime in September, right? I don't got the exact date off the top of the head, but they're supposed to fight. They were supposed to fight in September. To all the 5 people in the building, I really appreciate that, man. Hit the like button, show me some love. But like I said, I really feel like the reason why Canelo Alvarez is not fighting Terence Crawford in September is due to the fact, shout out to Zoe. Should have liked and subscribed. I appreciate it, man. Everybody hit the like button. But like I said, everybody's wondering about Canelo Alvarez. People are coming up with narratives. People talking about, oh, why this fight is not happening. Give me 1 second. I don't even got my Bluetooth on. Let me get the mic on at least. Hold on. Pardon me. If my audio is bad, just bear with me 1 moment, please. Don't tune off. Let me just, get my audio set up. As you already know, I don't really be live that often, but I promise that I'm going to be live a lot more often, even though I haven't made short videos lately, right? But like I said before, it's been reported that Canelo Alvarez has officially sealed the deal to fight Jake Paul in May, right? And based on what I read, it states that Canelo Alvarez is going to fight Jake Paul at 200 pounds. So it makes sense to me why Canelo Alvarez is not going to fight Terence Crawford in September. Mike Jukas, man, that's disappointing. Yeah, it is disappointing. It is. But I figured it out, and I think I'm 100% accurate because I think outside the box. Being that Canelo Alvarez is fighting Jake Paul at 200 pounds, right? For Canelo Alvarez to turn back around and get back in the ring in September at 168 pounds, that's a dangerous move. That's a weight drop from 200 to 168, from May to September to get in the ring with an elite level fighter like Terrence Bud Crawford. Let's not forget, you know I'm a historian. I gotta intertwine the past with the present. Remember when Roy Jones moved up to heavyweight and came back down to light heavyweight? We all know things did not turn out well for Roy Jones Jr. You know, he struggled against Antonio Tarver, and then he got knocked out by Antonio Tarver. Roy Jones was never the same fighter after that. He wasn't the same. So that's the reason why I feel Canelo Alvarez is not going to fight Terrence Bud Crawford. But does that mean that Terrence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez is never going to happen? No. It also been reported that Canelo Alvarez just sealed a 4-fight deal with Turki Al-Ashiki. Now I don't know if the fight with Jake Paul has anything to do with Turki Al-Ashiki in Riyadh season, but nevertheless, Canelo Alvarez has signed a 4-fight deal with Turki Al-Ashiki. Is there any other fights for Crawford? If no Canelo fight, I don't think he'll fight Boots. I'm gonna touch on that right now. Terrence Bud Crawford, right? It's also been reported via Turki Al-Ashiki that he wants to put together a fight between Terrence Crawford and Jaron Boots Ennis at the end of the year. He stated that. Now we already know that Jaron Ennis is scheduled to fight Stanionis in a unification bout. But it also stated at the time that Jaron Ennis is involved in some sort of a tournament between him and Stanionis, Teofimo, and Richardson Hitchens, Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, and all that, which once again brings me to question, and I'm not calling Turki Al-Ashiki a liar at all, but the legitimacy of his announcements. Because first Turki's talking about a tournament at 140 and 147 pounds between the fighters that I just mentioned. But now he stated that he wants Terrence Crawford versus Jaron Ennis at the end of the year. Now we also know that Terrence Crawford never really looked at Jaron Ennis as a lucrative opponent. Because I'm not going to call Terrence Crawford a duck. Terrence Crawford is, for me, top 2 pound for pound. You can flip it around. But if Turki Al-Ashiki is involved in this situation, I'm more than certain that Turki Al-Ashiki is going to pay like he weighs. And money talk. So Terrence Crawford would fight Jaron Boots Ennis if the money is right. And if Turki's involved, like he stated that he is involved, the money's going to be right, for sure. How are they going to have a tournament in 2 weight classes? Well, according to what I've read, according to what's out there, it's been out for a couple of weeks now, the tournament is supposed to start at 140 and 147. Teofimo Lopez. And that fight is not even signed and sealed yet. Teofimo Lopez is supposed to be fighting Richardson Hitchens, right? Jaron Ennis is supposed to be taking on Stanionis. That fight, to my knowledge, is signed and sealed. Jaron Ennis and Stanionis. And then on the other side, Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney, they're supposed to have a doubleheader. Assuming both guys are victorious, they're supposed to fight later on in the year. And if Teofimo Lopez is victorious over Richardson Hitchens, which is no walk in the park at all, he's supposed to take on the winner of Jaron Ennis and Stanionis. The problem I have with this is that that fight is not signed and sealed, Teo and Richardson Hitchens. I'm not sure if the Devin Haney card, in fact, the Devin Haney card is the Ryan Garcia card. Let me bring that back because he's the A side. That card is signed and sealed. Jaron Ennis and Stanionis is signed and sealed. But now, Turki Al-Ashiki, who is working with Terrence Bud Crawford, who's also interested in Terrence Crawford's in his best, you know what I'm saying? He's trying to look out for Crawford because he's working with him. He has his best interests at heart. Now he's saying that he wants to make a Terrence Crawford versus Jaron Ennis fight later this year. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I think Teo is struggling to make 140. I highly disagree with that. Teofimo Lopez is a fighter that stays in shape And to my knowledge, he was just on the Boxing Voice, I think yesterday, and he said that he was walking around right now at about 150 or 151 pounds. So that's more or less 10 pounds, basically, if you round it off. 10 pounds for a high level boxer who's always in the gym, that's not much to lose. I doubt Teofimo Lopez is struggling to make that weight. My question is, if Turki Al-Sheikh is going to try to make a Terence Crawford versus Jaron Ennis fight, where does that leave Teofimo Lopez? And mind you, Canelo Alvarez signed a 4-fight deal with Turki Al-Sheikh. So what are the potential 4 fights for Canelo Alvarez? Everybody in the chat, put those names up there. You gotta put, I'm not sure if Jake Paul is part of that package, but let me get the 4 fighters that you feel that Canelo Alvarez might be lined up to fight with Turki Al-Sheikh. You think Teo beats Hitchens? I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm a very big Teofimo Lopez supporter. I feel that at 140 pounds, Richardson Hitchens stylistically is his most difficult opponent, because Teo has shown in the past that he struggles with cutting off the ring. But Richardson Hitchens, with all the slickness that he has, he's not a fighter that runs. Hitchens, unlike Jermaine Ortiz, he's coming to fight. He's boxing, but he's not coming to survive. He's not coming to move around. Hitchens is going to sit there and try to jab with Teofimo, and I believe he's going to try to counterpunch with Teo in the middle of the ring, but keep his distance, right? It's not going to be an easy task. Teo's really going to learn how to cut the ring off with Eddie Reynoso, who Canelo Alvarez, who was trained by Eddie Reynoso, is an expert at cutting off the ring. Combine that with Teofimo's athleticism, his explosiveness, his power, Teo might have the best first move in boxing as far as like when you're in the middle of the ring counter punching. He's the best first move fighter in boxing. So I see that fight being a difficult fight for Teo, but I believe that Hitchens is gonna box with Teo in the middle of the ring, and he's gonna give him opportunities, and I see Teofimo Lopez pulling that fight off in a very close but impressive unanimous decision or split decision. It could be a stoppage too, depending on if Richardson Hitchens could take the power. But I got Teo winning that fight, but it's not going to be easy at all. Teo could fight Norman. I don't know what's going on with Brian Norman right now. You think? Let me see, Crawford, Pacheco, or Skull. I'm going to tell you the truth. You know what I like for Terence Crawford right now? If he's not going to fight Jaron Ennis, and Terence Crawford is really serious about moving up and fighting Canelo Alvarez, I would like to see Terence Crawford move up to 160 pounds and take on Landy Lara. A lot of people say, oh, that's a boring fight. I highly disagree. Landy Lara, for one, has slowed down. He's not moving around as much as he did in the past, right? He's sitting down on his punches. And Landy Lara, make no mistake about it, is an underrated puncher. He stopped Danny Garcia. He does have some knockouts, some highlight reel knockouts in his resume. And I could see Landy Lara going in there like, I'm going to stay in there and bang with Terence Crawford. And believe it or not, Landy Lara, pardon me for butchering his name, would be Terence Crawford's toughest fight since the Madrimore fight. Because Lara can box. He's a very good counterpuncher. He's a southpaw, which is something we haven't seen Bud Crawford in the ring with in quite some time. And he got some power. And he's never been stopped. I would like to see that fight. And it's a barometer. Even though it's not a prime Lara, which fought Canelo Alvarez, it's still an average Landy Lara who is fighting a smaller guy who is coming off for stopping Danny Garcia. I like that fight for Terence Crawford if he doesn't get the boots on his fight. And mind you, he headlined pay-per-view with Canelo Alvarez, so that'll do some decent numbers. I would definitely purchase that fight for sure. Lara's still getting KOs? Absolutely, he's getting KOs. That left hand is no joke. That's a tough fight for Bud. Yes, it is. Average Landy Lara, believe it or not, is going to have to go down as probably one or two, the two greatest Cuban fighters of the past generation. between him and Guillermo Rigondeaux. Those two, for me, for this generation that just passed, because those are like the 2010s, right? Those are the two best Cuban fighters. Gamboa could have been up there, but Gamboa kind of like fizzled out after that inactivity, and then he went and signed with 50 Cent, and things went downhill from there. So Erislandy Lara and Guillermo Rigondeaux, for me, are the two best Cuban fighters of the past and most recent generation. Who is the greatest Cuban fighter of all time? You know I'm a historian. Thank you for asking me that question. There was a Cuban fighter back in the days. I'm talking about back in the Sugar Ray Robinson days. His name was Kid Gavilan. Kid Gavilan is hands down the greatest Cuban fighter of all time. And then there's also a Cuban, half Mexican fighter back in the day called Jose Napoles. Jose Napoles, aka Mantequilla. He was a half Cuban, half Mexican fighter. You have to look him up. He was a problem as well. But I would definitely have to say Kid Gavilan. He's from like the 1940s or 1950s. Like I said, he fought Sugar Ray Robinson, if I'm not correct, and he's from that same era. Okay, you think Haney can still come back and be a contender after the Ryan Garcia trauma? And what do you think about Ryan versus Rolly? As far as Devin Haney goes, it's yet to be seen. Devin Haney's gonna have to show if he's one of two type of fighters. We had fighters, legendary fighters back in the days that took losses and they weren't able to bounce back from losses. Roy Jones Jr., for me, a top 10 all-time great, right? Despite being a top 10 all-time great, Roy Jones Jr. took a devastating loss. And even though he came back, he had some noteworthy wins over Jeff Lacy, over Tito Trinidad, but those guys were guys that he was supposed to beat. Trinidad was a natural welterweight who hasn't fought in a few years, and Jeff Lacy was already demoralized by Joe Kawasaki. Roy Jones never got a chance to really reclaim greatness, right? When a fighter loses and reclaims greatness, it adds to its legacy. Had Roy Jones Jr. defeated Joe Kawasaki, then I would say Roy Jones Jr. was a fighter that was able to bounce back from a devastating loss, but he never did. So we don't know if Devin Haney is going to fall into that category or not. That remains to be seen. So I'm not going to write Devin Haney off. He has the opportunity to bounce back. Do I believe he can? Absolutely. Devin Haney has the skill set. That was only one fight where he took punishment. I think physically he could bounce back. The question is, mentally, can he bounce back? And we're gonna see if he gets past Jose Ramirez, and then he gets past Ryan Garcia. We can mention Devin Haney amongst the great fighters that was able to lose in a demoralizing fashion and then bounce back. That's a good conversation to have for a future live, about fighters coming back and fighters that weren't, because there's a lot that did and a lot that weren't. That being said, let me answer another part of your question. Ryan Garcia versus Rolly Romero. Very interesting fight. A lot of people are not giving Rolly a shot based on the way Ryan Garcia looked in his last fight. But when Ryan Garcia fought Rolly Romero in sparring, Rolly Romero gave him a lot of problems. But I believe that Ryan Garcia, especially now that he's going back with Eddie Reynoso, who works on fundamentals, works on drills, if Ryan Garcia is fully focused, I got Ryan Garcia scoring a highlight reel knockout over Rolly Romero within 7 rounds. And by the way, I got 5 people in the building. I had 11, but I was going to say, hit the like button. I got 5 on 5. It's all good. You know your stuff. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. I've been watching boxing since I was a little itty-bitty kid. Shout out to my Uncle Theo Nelson. Rest in peace. The first fight party I've been to, I was a little kid, right? He brought me over to his friend's house, and we saw the Mike Tyson versus Trevor Berbick fight. That was 1987. That was the first real live fight that I saw on TV on HBO. And from there, that's it. He didn't have to push me to watch boxing. I became a hardcore fan from that point on. Hi, bro. You showed up in my feed randomly, but I wish you all the best with life and boxing. God bless you too. I appreciate you for tuning in, you know. I started my channel I had a YouTube account for a few years now. And a few years ago, I made like 3 videos, like training, motivational videos. I think 2 of them were Teofimo Lopez, and 1 of them was Jaron Ennis. But as far as me making low-nose boxing videos, talking about boxing, making videos like I'm doing right now, I would say that was about maybe about 2.5 years ago is when I started actively making videos, making content, talking about boxing and things like that. I've been to gyms, conducted interviews. I went to Philadelphia a couple of times because I grew up in Philadelphia as well. I'm a New York, Philly, Jersey, Rican. I'm a tri-state guy all the way. I went to Bosie's gym a couple of times. Shout out to Bosie Ennis. And I did some good interviews over there. I interviewed Richardson Hitchens when he was training for the Mustafa Limon fight, which is on my channel. That was one of my most viewed channels in the shortest amount of time. Shout out to Richardson Hitchens, man. Even though you see him braggadocious, talking heavy, trash talking, what I will say is this. Richardson Hitchens is one of the few fighters that's very approachable, very humble. He'll stop and conversate with you, sign autographs. He's a good dude. If he fights Tio, if that fight happens, I'm rooting for Tio because Tio is my favorite fighter of this generation. But other than that, Hitchens against anybody else at 140 or 135, I'm rooting for Hitchens. He made me a fan by the way he carried himself. You know what I mean? Do you think Xander Zayas can be the next great Puerto Rican boxer? I believe he can, but what I will say is that Xander Zayas is in a very tough division right now. He's at 154. You got Terrence Crawford there. You got Madrimov. You got Virgil Ortiz. You got the Russian boy that knocked out Tim Tszyu. You got Tim Tszyu. You got Sebastian Fundora. You have a lot of deep. That's a very deep division. The names aren't really attractive like that. You don't have the most star-worthy names, star-studded names, but you got tough competition. And Xander Zayas is being moved carefully because his business handlers, his management team knows that they need more time. So you got certain fighters that are ready to move up right away. You got fighters that are, it's called fast track. It's been going on for years, right? Example, Lomachenko, fast track. David Morrell, fast track, even though he took a speed bump, but he gonna bounce back. Certain fighters with certain amateur pedigree, certain natural God-gifted ability, those type of fighters get moved up faster, and it's been going on for years. Fernando Vargas, a young champion, going into the Trinidad fight, he only had 20 fights under his belt. And for me, Fernando Vargas had a better resume with 20 fights going into the Trinidad fight than what Canelo Alvarez had going into the Shane Mosley, going into the Floyd Mayweather fight. Fernando Vargas had defeated Ike Corte at the time, who was coming off of a controversial loss to Oscar De La Hoya. Fernando Vargas defeated Winky Wright in a very close fight. He stopped Yuri Boy Campos. He stopped Raul Marquez, right? We got Teofimo Lopez, who became undisputed in 16 fights. We got Keyshawn Davis, who's fighting for a world title next week in 12, 13 fights. Certain fighters get moved differently. Xander Zayas is a skilled fighter, but they're moving him carefully. Xander Zayas has decent fundamentals, but he's not a big one-punch knockout artist. If Xander Zayas, with the skills that he has, his nice fundamentals, if he would have had the gift of Edgar Berlanga's puncher power, I feel he would have been moved up faster. But as of right now, personally, I'm not sure if Xander Zayas is ready for a world title at 154 pounds. But we got to see how his career pans out. Plus, he's a big guy. He might outgrow that division before he even becomes a world champion. But yeah, thank you for asking me that question. Because I like Xander Zayas. He's Boricua. Hitchens, one of my like I said, Richardson Hitchens is very crafty. He's a tall fighter. He uses his jab. He got a nice right hand. He got pretty good defense, but he doesn't move around like he doesn't run. He boxes in the pocket, keeps his distance, but he's not a runner. People try to talk about him like he's somebody that runs. Hitchens knows how to measure distance. And Teal got his work cut out for him because Teal is going to have to learn from Eddie Reynoso how to cut the ring off. What I will say is this. If Teal fights the way he fought against Jermaine Ortiz and Sandor Martin, then Hitchens beats him. But if Teal comes out like he did against Josh Taylor and learns from Eddie Reynoso and Canelo how to cut the ring off, I got Teal winning that fight because he's more gifted than Richardson Hitchens. And Teal's being overlooked too. They talk about Teal like he's not really that good. Teal is very gifted. For me, he's the most athletically gifted Latino fighter since Hector Macho Camacho. He fights like a slick black fighter with more power. Have you seen how Vargas is doing around saying Trinidad might have cheated? What are your thoughts on that? I don't believe it. I'm going to tell you this, right? Here's the deal. When Trinidad was caught by Naseem Richardson wrapping his hands, right? And Naseem Richardson has an interview, if you look it up on YouTube, he said himself, Trinidad did not have plaster. This is not the same situation as Antonio Margarito when he had plaster, when he was caught cheating against Shane Mosley, which tainted his legacy. Trinidad's hand wraps, the way it was wrapped, the style that it was wrapped was only, to my knowledge, inappropriate in the state of New York. Everywhere else, it was good money. So no, Trinidad did not cheat. Trinidad, if you watch how he fights, right, Trinidad doesn't even throw that many punches. This is how you can tell if a guy throws punches, if a guy has power, right? When you see a guy like Antonio Margarito, right, he throws a lot of punches like David Benavidez. He's a high volume puncher. Yes, he gets stoppages. Yes, Margarito does have power, plaster or no plaster. But Margarito is more of an accumulation puncher, right? He throws a lot of punches. So when he fought Mosley, before that, when he fought Cotto, he had plaster throwing a lot of punches. Trinidad never throws a lot of punches, and he still gets guys out of there. The big punchers, if you notice, don't really have a high punch rate. You look at Gervonta Davis, doesn't throw that many punches. Canelo Alvarez doesn't throw that many punches, right? Mike Tyson didn't throw that many punches. Julian Jackson, I could go on and on. The real big punchers don't throw that many punches. They know how to place their punches properly. So to answer your question, no. Felix Trinidad did not cheat. Trinidad did not throw that many punches. He was very calculated, and he got dudes out of there in a spectacular fashion. Because if you got plaster, right? If you got plaster and your power's not all that, it's going to make a difference. But there's a difference between real power and plaster. Trinidad's hands was wrapped to the point that it wasn't allowed in New York City. But no, Trinidad did not cheat as far as plaster. And that's coming from Naseem Richardson. Rest in peace to the great Naseem Richardson. He's the one that caught Trinidad. You know what I mean? The same way he caught Margarito. So there you go. No, Trinidad did not cheat at all. Absolutely not. Did you ever box? I never boxed professionally. I had a lot of street fights growing up because I came up in the city. I've been to the gyms. I sparred a lot and stuff like that when I was a young teenager. But I could have been a boxer because I had natural ability. My uncle taught me how to box when I was a kid. My uncle, he was in the Marines. He showed me the basics. He showed me all the time. Keep your chin tucked, keep your hands up, throw straight, short punches, right? But he knew what he knew. But the best advice he gave me was watch the fighters that are great. Look at the things that they do and practice it. So I went to the gym and I did just that. But while I was in the gym, training and stuff like that, sparring and things of that nature, I was also living a different lifestyle before I found Christ. I was wrapped up with the things that happened within the inner city. I was intrigued by these things, and I was active in the streets at the time. So I was like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So in boxing, you have to be 100% with it. You got to be all the way in. But I could confidently say that, yeah, my knuckle game is decent. You know what I mean? To be modest, because I know how to handle myself. But no, I've never boxed professionally or amateur. But I've sparred with good amateurs and a couple of pros when I was a kid growing up. Yeah, I know what I'm doing, but no, I never boxed before because I'm not a professional. But I enjoy the sport though, for sure. Um, yeah, like I said, so Canelo Alvarez, back to the topic. Who's your top five favorite of all time? All right, um, favorite and who I feel is top five is a different list because who I feel with logic is the top five greatest of all time. Number one, and once again, I'm not going to disrespect legends by not mentioning certain fighters because my knowledge of boxing goes far, but I can't sit here and tell you everybody's resume. So based on what I know, humbly, for me, top five pound for pound, who I feel are the top five pound for pound, 1 through 5. Number one, Sugar Ray Robinson. Number two, Floyd Mayweather Jr. Number 3, Muhammad Ali. Number 4, Sugar Ray Leonard. Number 5, Roberto Duran. As far as my top 5 favorite fighters of all time, that's a tricky one. Because every era, once again, I've been watching boxing since the late 80s. Mike Tyson when he became a champion. And I'm going to tell you a story. Growing up, right, I caught Roberto Duran, Sugar Ray Leonard, those guys, but they were later in their career. Because once again, I was watching boxing since like 1987 when Mike Tyson became champion. If it was 87 or 85, one of those years. So Duran and Leonard were fighting at that time. They were around, but they were past their prime. So at the time when I first started watching those fights, I seen Leonard beat Duran. Duran was past his prime. So at the time, I didn't really think that much of Roberto Duran. But my uncle always told me, mira, Duran is the truth. You got to watch Duran when he was in his prime. So I did my due diligence, and I started watching earlier fights of Roberto Duran, and I made it my business to study his career. Roberto Duran was the greatest lightweight of all time. Going into the Sugar Ray Leonard fight, Duran was already considered the greatest lightweight of all time. He was undisputed in the 2-belt era. Going into the Leonard fight, Duran was about 29 years old. He was about 75-1 with like 65 knockouts, which is incredible. And he had a tremendous skill set. And with that being said, he became one of my favorites. What I just gave you is what I feel are the top 5 greatest of all time. Now, as far as who are my 5 favorites of all time, that's a very tough one. I'm going to tell you my favorite fighter of all time was Felix Tito Trinidad. When Trinidad was on top, there was no fight party like a Felix Trinidad fight party. Like that was the equivalent of another Puerto Rican Day Parade type of vibe whenever Tito would fight. How did you watch early fights back then? When you mean early fights, you're talking about Duran, stuff like that? Well, you know, like I said, my uncle, Nelson, God rest his soul, he had brought me to one of his close friends' house back in the day as a kid to watch a Mike Tyson versus Trevor Burbank fight when he became a world champion. Mind you, there was no YouTube back then. Good question, by the way. But my uncle's friend, his name was Georgie, God rest his soul as well. Georgie had a whole collection of VHS boxing tapes. So I used to go up there as a little kid, and I used to borrow those tapes, and I used to watch those tapes, and I would come downstairs, right? And this is back, I don't know how old you are, but back then, in order to make copies, we needed 2 VCRs. So I had 2 VCRs together, and I would buy blank tapes, and I would record from his VCR tapes into mine. And that's how I started watching Roberto Duran tapes, because he had all those tapes. But then later on, once DVDs came into play, I started ordering a package of DVDs from a website back then. This was like in the maybe early 2000s. It was called boxingjunkies.com, right? You would go on that site and you would choose any fighter, and they would have their whole catalog, or at least most of them. So I had a lot of the Roberto Duran fights, Canelo Whitaker fights, and then, you know, over the years, further on, I still learned about Roberto Duran. I'm going to give you a little known fact about Roberto Duran. Everybody thinks that Roberto Duran started at 135. That's not true. Roberto Duran's first world title was at 135 against Ken Buchanan, who is the greatest Scottish fighter of all time, who is a Hall of Famer. Duran's first title was at 135, but Duran turned pro at 119 pounds. So to start your career at 119 and become a world champion at 160 pounds, in arguably the best era in boxing in terms of skills, is incredible. I learned things new every single day. How did you? Much love, Lo. What you think of the Keyshawn fight happening soon? Thinking of going also. I'm going over there, man. Get your tickets. I advise you to get it soon. That event is actually selling out fast. I'm gonna be there with my little cousin. This is his brand, Ethan Badlands Burgos, my little cousin from Philadelphia. That's my cousin's son, right? Miguel Burgos, from my mother's side, because I'm a Maldonado, but my mother's Burgos. His son Ethan, who's my little cousin, 16 years old, he's in the Junior Olympics in Philadelphia. And he's going to be the next great Philly Rican. He's knocking dudes out. He's knocking niggas shit loose right now at 16 years old. So this is his brand. Follow him on Instagram. Ethan Burgos Badlands. Yeah, I'm going to be there with him and his dad next Friday for the Keyshawn Davis fight, for sure, yeah. So yeah, get your tickets, man. Pull up, holla at me, hit me up. I'm looking forward to that. And as far as Keyshawn Davis, I think Keyshawn Davis is a very impressive fighter. He kind of reminds me of one of the best lightweights at the time from the 80s, Livingston Bramble. Keyshawn Davis reminds me a lot of Livingston Bramble. And it's crazy because this generation could have been the best generation of 135, but the guys never fought each other. In the early to mid 80s, at 135, for me, that was the best era at 135 based on my knowledge of watching boxing throughout my years. You had Julio Cesar Chavez, you had Hector Camacho, you had Pernell Whitaker, who came on later on, you had Edmond Rosario, another Puerto Rican great, Jose Luis Ramirez, another Mexican great, you had Vinny Pazienza, you had Ray Boom Boom Mancini, you had the Jamaican boy who I just mentioned, who I compared with Keyshawn by the name of Livingston Bramble. You had Cornelius Bozar Edwards. You had a lot of top, solid guys at 135 pounds at that time. And for the most part, they all fought each other, whether it was at 135 or they ended up meeting up at 140. But yeah, that's who Keyshawn Davis reminds me of. Livingston Bramble, look him up. Sometimes I buy boxing on Blu-ray to watch old Showtime fights. Yeah, I was doing that too, you know what I mean? When I had my little situation, whatever, some of us were able to have certain things like portable DVD players and stuff like that you know, COs would bless us with, things of that nature. Anyway, I used to have some fights and I used to watch them in there as well. But yeah, like I said, Canelo Alvarez, for me, is fighting Jake Paul. That's what's happening at 200 pounds. So if he's fighting Jake Paul in May at 200 pounds, to go back down to 168 and fight Terrence Crawford in September, right? From May to September, what is that? June, July, August, September, 4 months. So Canelo Alvarez, that's going to be a big weight drop. That's why I feel the Terrence Crawford fight is not going to happen. Nevertheless, I really appreciate everybody that tuned in, left comments, subscribe to my channel, Low Notes Boxing, follow me on Instagram. May God bless y'all, and I appreciate y'all. I'm out.